warm welcome to this special session of the Right Circle. It's a pleasure to be back here, and this time in conversation with Prajwal Parajuly, whose stock in the literary world continues to rise and rise, not just in all these years that he's been on the literary map, but also in the run-up to this session over the past couple of weeks. The French translation of his book, Land Where I Flee, has been nominated for the first Nobel Prize just 2 weeks after it made it to the long list of the Émile Guémet Prize. Those are both very prestigious awards, and the latest development there has been that his book is now among the finalists in the Émile Guémet Prize. So congratulations already, Prajwal, and thank you so much for joining us for this session. We hope and wish that this autumn there's more good news coming your way when those awards come.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Swati, and thank you to all of you for having me here. It's wonderful to be interacting with people in Jaipur, one of my favorite cities in the country. I look forward to what our talk unravels today.
Absolutely. So let's start with your journey as an author. I mean, where did it all start? Take us through that, and how you've seen yourself evolve as a writer over the years.
See, Swati, I grew up in Gangtok in Sikkim in northeastern India. And I was always interested in writing, but you do not grow up in Gangtok with dreams of becoming a writer. You know, it is not a career that you can aspire to. My path to writing is a lot different from the paths other writers have taken, because a lot of it has to do with laziness, honestly. You know, it was in 2009, I was working as an advertising executive at the Village Voice in New York, and not liking my job very much. So I did what an Indian kid doesn't do. I quit my job, and when well-meaning questions from my parents, can we raise the volume, please? Okay, when well-meaning questions from my parents about what I was doing with my life increased in frequency and vehemence, I used to tell them I was writing in order to shut them up. So that is sort of how I started writing a story for the Gurkha's Daughter. I had never written fiction before. I wrote one story and then another and then another. I had very little idea of how the publishing world functioned. I knew nothing about how short stories received a bit of a stepdaughterly treatment from the publishing world. So that I embarked on a collection of short stories because I mistakenly thought that writing a novel would be too difficult. It would be a jungle impossible to penetrate. It was only years later when I wrote a novel that I realized that writing it was a lot easier than writing short stories was, but we can come to that later. So that's how my writing journey has been.
Right. You know, many of us wonder what it takes to be a full-time writer in today's world when literature festivals are growing in numbers, but genuine interest in reading is somewhat waning. Take us through, you know, what you think are the privileges, the challenges, you know, the perception, the reality of being an almost full-time writer, because that's what you like to call yourself.
Yeah. I call myself an almost full-time writer because once a year I teach at a university in America, or students from an American university travel to me in India. And during the rest of the time, I could be considered a full-time writer, which means that I will not be living in a Fifth Avenue apartment anytime soon. but I do enjoy the freedom that not having a 9 to 5 job provides. Uh, it is a very exciting time to be a writer. These last 10 to 15 years, especially in South Asia, have been very, very good to writers. First of all, you have literature festivals. Almost every town in India now has a literary festival. In fact, there was a time not very long ago that I just split it from Litfest to Litfest, Litfest to Litfest, city to city, and talking about my books and talking about myself, and uh, so that was there. There may be a lot of complaint in the West about newspapers not dedicating a lot of space to reviews. In India, I think that too is not necessarily the case. I think a lot of newspapers like the Hindustan Times and the Hindu and the Telegraph do give plenty of space to books and writers. Uh, for me, I mean, there's been a lot of generosity from readers in a lot of places in the world, and I am extremely grateful for that. After a certain point, literature festivals can get on your nerves because it's you run into your friends, you run into the same kind of audience. You often are answering very similar questions, um, but uh, but they are important. They are important for us writers because it's a wonderful opportunity to get out of the house. It's you know what we don't tell you is writing is a very, very solitary job. There is you're often slaving over the perfect sentence for 3 or 4 hours without having interacted with another human. So a literature festival gives you that great avenue to just get out, go meet people, interact with readers. And I am a proponent of literary festivals. I think there should be as many of them as possible. And I think every city should have a few.
Right. Take us through the behind the scenes aspect of writing, the process, the method, or the lack of it. How does it work for you? What are your biggest challenges when you write?
Well, Swati, I hope there are not very many young aspiring writers in the audience right now, because I am an extremely ill-disciplined writer. I've always been a writer with no method. I only write when I feel like it, which sounds like I'm in an enviable position, but that's not the case at all. I have forced myself to write, even though I didn't feel the inspiration. And whatever I've produced has not been up to my satisfaction at all. By now I've been writing for long enough to know that when this burst of inspiration strikes, I should give up everything. I should abandon whatever lunch plans there were and do nothing but write. So there have been times I've written for 17-hour stretches. There have been times I've written for weeks and weeks, because I know that if I do not catch this when it strikes, it's going to be a while before it strikes again. So there is very little discipline, but I also realize that should the writing gods be smiling on me, I will not let go of that opportunity. You've caught me at a time where I haven't written anything for 6 or 7 months. I'm hoping in the next few days something happens, and I write for 17-hour stretches, 20-hour stretches. I did my master's in creative writing, and I came across some of the most disciplined writers on the program. And I have tried doing what they tried to do. You know, some people wrote for 2,000 words a day, 2,500 words a day. Shobha Day, in fact, writes a minimum of 1,500 words a day, no matter what. I've tried doing all that. It hasn't exactly worked. I'm hoping it will in the near future, but right now it hasn't. Does that answer your?
Yeah, yeah, no, that does. Some people do it like yas, what singers do early morning. So they have to do it every day, even if it means just writing to writing prompts. Yes. But yeah, that's what I was coming to. My next question is about the fact that you studied writing formally. And so, how do you see that having an impact on your writing? Does that have an impact on your writing?
You know, I got my master's in creative writing, and there are a lot of programs in. There are a few programs in America that are fully financed. So there are universities like UT Austin, Michigan, that pay you to get a degree in creative writing. So you have the space to explore your writing for 2 to 3 years. I did not do one of these programs. I was on a master's that I shelled out a little more than $50,000 for. When very, very serious students write to me and ask me what my experience on my creative writing master's was, what I tell them is, look, it was great only because I got a book deal right after. Or in fact, I got my book deal midway through my creative writing master's. The course did not have anything to do with the book deal though. Okay, so that's one thing, because when you pay a significant amount of money to get a degree, you're constantly questioning whether or not it's worth it. You're weighing the value of every assignment to ask yourself and your peers if everything that you're doing is worth $50,000 or more. Some of the positives that my program had would be we were forced to dabble with more than one genre. You know, I went into the program as a fiction writer, but my tutors, my professors wouldn't allow me to write fiction alone. So I dabbled with poetry. I wrote poetry for the first time in my life. For my final year project, I wrote a screenplay, and of which I'm equally proud and ashamed. It's a bad screenplay, but it's something I wouldn't have done had I not been forced to do it. And it was a group of like-minded people who were very serious about their writing, who were very serious about writing to be published, who were very serious about writing as a career. So that was always nice. To this day, if you have money lying around somewhere or you get a scholarship, go do a creative writing master's. But if the pinch of whatever amount that you pay for the masters is difficult to bear, don't. You can always find a creative writing community online. You can always find it at university. You can always reach out to writers out there whom you could convince to serve as mentors. So that's, sorry, this was a long-winded answer, but
No, that makes sense. Your book, Land Where I Flee, is about four Nepali Indian siblings who converge in Gangtok to celebrate the 84th birthday of their formidable grandmother, her Chaurasi, as you call it. That's also very intriguing, you know, the Chaurasi. And then I read that piece where you explain what Chaurasi really is. The hills are a charming setting, but your gaze isn't a charmed one. So was that a sort of a deliberate attempt to sort of keep it real and walk the reader through the good, the bad, the ugly?
You know, I, it may not be a charmed gaze, but it's not an entirely jaundiced gaze either. You know, it may have a lot to do with who I am as a writer and the way I write. I mean, I like writing in a no frills, unemotional way. I have a lot of respect for writers who can describe the Kanchenjunga changing hue in 3 pages, in 4 pages, using the most mellifluous of words. More power to them. I respect you, but I'm not that writer. You know, it's all about being pared down. It's all about I call it unemotional writing. I call it, unflowery writing, I guess. It could be another way to look at it. But the other point is also that, Gangtok is a city I am very, very familiar with. It's a city that's very close to my heart. And I also do not consider it, the last Shangri-La. I do not consider it the ultimate paradise. And writing about writing about this city as a character with its flaws, with its waterlogged stairs and its potholed roads, seemed like a very natural thing to do. It was all about being authentic to my writing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. And it's also very truthful. I mean, what comes through is that it's got that element of being very truthful. Through the book, one also sees an expression slash exploration of identity. You navigate the complex areas of how ethnicity interacts with nationality. So, for example, what it means to be a Nepali Indian. You also touch upon the Gorkhaland movement, almost sort of without letting any of that take precedence over the narrative or the plot. You kind of wanted to weave these elements in?
This question of identity is of a lot of importance to the Nepali-speaking Indian, because there's always that issue where when someone asks, the fact that the Nepali Indian has to underscore his nationality every time he mentions his ethnicity. It's an issue that is extremely frustrating to a number of us. Something I like to believe I've made peace with, but remnants of the lack of understanding in the broader sphere do rear their head every so often. And for it to have spilled into my book was again a pretty natural thing. The Bhutanese refugee situation, for example, we do not know much about it despite having lived in India all these years. And, the world, of course, didn't pay it much attention, because in the grand scheme of things, who cares about 106,000 Nepali-speaking Bhutanese? Bhutan doesn't have oil. Bhutan is not, it's not an important nation for America or any other big country for that matter. And, it was a woefully unreported, underreported issue. I will say that I write fiction, Swati, with the primary purpose of telling a story. All these issues, the Gorkhaland agitation, the demand for a separate state for Nepali-speaking Indians, the Bhutanese issues are very, very close to my heart. But I write fiction with the primary purpose of telling a story. It is, if these other issues somehow get addressed in the process, there's nothing like it. I am not going to distance myself from them. But I write novels, I write short stories with the intention of telling a story.
Got it. You know, the book has several interesting characters fleshed out by you in all their nuances, including the feisty grandmother who loves to smoke beedies. Then there is the domestic worker who happens to be a eunuch, and the sibling who has a secret to keep. Which among these is your favorite character and why?
Whoa. Tricky, yeah. I have enjoyed writing all the characters, but I think at the end of the day, Chitralekha, the 84-year-old grandmother, has to be my favorite. You know, when I was growing up, I read far too many grandmas who whispered stories into their grandchildren's ears, pickled onions in the sun, and endowed all the love and affection of their world on their lovely rose-cheeked grandchildren who were never wanting for any attention in their family. Okay. Chitralekha, unfortunately or fortunately, is not one of these grandmothers. You know, she, just the way she smokes her beanie with the O of her thumb and forefinger, which she puffs into the faces of her grandchildren or uses to intimidate men of power. Uh, makes her my favorite, and I love that, you know, she makes a putty out of these powerful politicians, and I like how practical she is in so many ways, and yet so stuck in her ways in others. I mean, you know, I could go as far as to say that she is perhaps the most flawed character in the book, but the other characters are pretty damn flawed too. Chitralekha would be number one. I think a close second would be Prasanthi, the helper in the house. Only because when I started writing Prasanthi, just to give a little idea to those of you who are not familiar with the book, Prasanthi is a eunuch character that Chitralekha sort of plucked from the streets and gave a home to. And writing her initially was a lot of fun, but I also realized that she was quickly veering into the caricature. You know, this fun-loving character who goes about creating trouble everywhere she goes, who has no qualms about answering back her employees' grandkids like they're her equals, etc., etc. But little by little, you know, this was a character that grew. It sprouted wonderful wings, and she, to my belief, is the last thing from a caricature by the end of the book. I think the way she grows as a character is quite beautiful. So yeah, Chitralekha, Prasanthi, 1 and 2.
Right. And a linked question would be if there's an autobiographical element in Rutwa's character, the writer sibling.
There is, I keep telling reporters that there is a bit of me in all the characters, and no doubt about it. And that Rutwa, this writer who shows up uninvited to the reunion, may be Prajwal Parajuly gone bad. Okay? Back in the day when I was writing this book, it so happened that, so I wrote this book after I got my book deal. And for reasons best known to them, the Indian media were treating me like I was the new Gandhi. You know, they had not read a word of what I'd written, but thanks to a number of factors, the fact that I was still a student when I got the book deal, I was a 25-year-old, I think, or 25 or 26, which in the writing world makes you a fetus. And writing Land Where I Flee was easy in the sense that it flowed out of me, but I was often awake in the middle of the night wondering what would happen if my books were not able to live up to the hype that the Indian media or, had generated around me. That is how the character of Ruthwa came about. A writer character who somehow does something unforgivable, who falls from whatever pedestal his readers have put him on. And that's how Ruthwa came about. Ruthwa is Prajwal Parajuly gone bad. He could be Prajwal Parajuly gone bad. I hope I do not. I will never resort to the kind of things he has done, and I hope I do not face the professional difficulties that he has encountered in his life. But yeah, there are elements of me in him. Yeah.
That's very interesting. At this point, would you like to read an excerpt from the book? We're somewhere halfway there in our conversation, and I think.
Do you have a preference? Is there anything in particular you'd like me to read?
I think from the Bhagavati section, unless you have some other, yeah.
Okay. So just to give you a little backstory, all you readers, prospective readers, this takes place in Boulder, Colorado. Bhagwati is one of the grandchildren, the oldest grandchild. She is a Brahmin who many years ago eloped with a quote unquote a lower caste person, owing to which she has been ostracized. And Ram is her husband. And this reflection that you will be privy to happens on account of a little conversation that Bhagwati has with Ram. Okay? Those of you who have copies of the book on you, page 23 and 24. All right. How ironic it was that her husband, an untouchable, the lowest of the low castes, an upsetting byproduct of the heinous system that her ancestors helped create and propagate, should be so full of piety. He knew the shlokas, memorized elliptical Sanskrit mantras, read the Gita, and understood what festival was celebrated for what reason. He was combative when she, a Brahmin, dismissed Hinduism's many superstitions, made her analyze and reanalyze these beliefs, and furnished her with the scientific reasoning behind them, which she grudgingly acknowledged. And yet, he could never become a priest. He would never be allowed near the altar of most Hindus. He was a casualty of Hinduism who had chosen not to be a victim, an untouchable who had no shame about his low caste as much as he did of robbing his Brahmin wife of hers on account of her marriage to him. A bigger Hindu, a better Hindu than she or anyone she knew. Ram Bahadur Damai, her husband, whose kind the Christian missionaries had been targeting for centuries, and whose family had stood firm in their devotion to Hinduism, naming their child after a Hindu god. Ram Bahadur Damai, of the Taylor caste, the father of her half-caste children, who would thankfully not be taunted in this country for carrying in their bloodline accusations of incest and consanguinity. Ram Bahadur Damai, responsible for the biggest blemish anyone had brought on her family, for belonging to a family of tailors, of alterers and cutters, for altering family dynamics in a way that could never be unaltered, for ripping grandmother from granddaughter in a way that could never be rehemmed. Ram Bahadur Damai, who gave her two sons in whose DNA were Damai blood and Brahmin blood, one infiltrating another, poisoning another. The two sons her grandmother would never touch, whose presence would desecrate her ancestral house. Ram Bahadur Damai was a better human being than any of her family members could ever be. Thank you.
That is just one of the powerful paragraphs from Prajwal's book. This is what it looks like. I'll hold it here for like 10 seconds so that people can have a look at it. And I have thoroughly enjoyed reading it. And I recommend that everybody who's wants, goes and picks up this book and reads it. Parallels have been drawn, Prajwal, between your book and the movie Kapoor and Sons. And of course, in the movie, it's a grandfather, and in your story, it's a grandmother that the story revolves. But what are the glaring similarities? And in a perhaps fairer and a hypothetical world, if you were to have been consulted before the movie was made, would you have changed anything there?
Well, Swati, there are similarities between some aspects of my book and the movie. And I like to believe that the similarities are a coincidence. I honestly do not want to cast aspersions on the integrity of the writers who wrote the movie. I think that's where I would like to end it. The book was published about 7 years ago. The movie came out about 3 or 4 years ago. I think it's a very good movie, understated, elegant. Family dynamics have been explored in a very sensitive way. And I wish the creators the very best of luck. I hope that sorts things there.
Right. Tell us your previous book, The Gorkha's Daughter. Besides, of course, the fact that you told us it's a book of short stories. Is it also set in the hills, as the title suggests?
The Gorkha's Daughter was my first book, a collection of short stories based in the lives of Nepali-speaking people. So you have stories in Kathmandu, in Bhutan, in Gangtok, in Darjeeling, in Kalimpong, all parts of the world where my people live. And in fact, each of the stories in the book is prefaced by a map in order to give everyone in the world an idea of where it is based. And yeah, I was learning how to write when I wrote the book. It's a book that's very close to my heart. I do think that of the two books, The Gorkha's Daughter is the better book, but you didn't hear it from me. And Swati, as I said earlier, I was learning how to write fiction with The Gorkha's Daughter, right? I hadn't yet joined my creative writing masters then. It was only after I finished The Gorkha's Daughter that I joined my program. And I did not realize how difficult publishing short stories was, especially in the West. And I'm so thankful for that, for being ignorant of that, because had I known that publishers didn't touch collections of short stories with a 10-inch pole, I likely wouldn't have written the book. It was only after I started writing the novel that I realized how much more difficult writing short stories was than writing a novel. Again, to go back to one of the first questions you asked about my evolution as a writer, that could have also been because I'd evolved somewhat as a writer between the two books, which is why Land Where I Flee felt a lot easier to write. It could have been because, again, you know, the press was treating me like I was the best thing to have happened to the literary world. So everything that was going right, everything that could go right was going right. But I have had a lot of difficulty working on my third book. Again, could be I'm a more conscious writer now, could be that I'm a more evolved writer, could be that a sentence that would have been satisfactory 2 books ago is no longer a satisfactory sentence. So I'm actually thankful for whatever naivety, whatever lack of experience there was when I wrote these 2 books. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. You've been a regular at the Jaipur Literature Festival, and a large part of the audience today is from Jaipur, the city that hosts JLF. Um, a lot of festivals, in fact, everything is now virtual, and JLF also, unless there's a miracle, is going to be virtual this year. Have you made peace with virtual literature festivals, at least for now?
In the beginning, I didn't. In the beginning, I turned down every invitation that came my way because what I said was, I accept literary festival invites in order to go see a new place, in order to travel, in order to actually have, one-on-one interactions with readers and friends. So 6 months into the lockdown, 7 months into the lockdown, I realized that this may be the only way to preserve whatever loveliness of literature festivals there is. It's not the same, I know, it's not the same. For example, you're able to see me, but I'm not able to gauge audience reaction right now. It would be kind of fun to see if someone was falling asleep or someone was laughing or smiling, etc., etc. But kudos to all these festival organizers and to foundations and agencies like yours for keeping some aspect of the literary discourse alive. You know, not the same, but this is what we might be left with. And there is something to be said about the Jaipur Literature Festival. You should be proud, you should be thrilled that what is perhaps what is without doubt the most amazing literary event in the world takes place in your city. It's a magical time, and there are offshoots everywhere. I've attended the Jaipur Literature Festival at the British Library in New York, and it's wonderful. I hope that, 2021 may not be a possibility, but I'm hoping something happens, say in the latter half of 2021, and there is a mini JLF somewhere.
Sure, amen to that. Writers are often recluses, perhaps to be able to write in peaceful isolation. Many of them choose to have minimal social media presence, but some of them like to use the social media platforms as a tool to connect with their readers. Tell us what your relationship with the social media is like, and where do you fare on the love-hate scale as far as social media is concerned?
I mostly loathe it. My publicist forced me on Twitter. Around the time I got my book deal, I was not on Facebook. I was forced to be on Facebook. I do not enjoy social media at all and have been known to take breaks for several months at a stretch. The last time I was out of Facebook was for almost a year. until my agent asked me to get back on it when the French translation of Land Where I Flee was coming out. That was in March. See, I realized the importance of it. I realized that days of a writer as a recluse may be long gone. There are some writers out there who've done a great job of not being in the public eye, having only their writing in the public eye. Take Elena Ferrante for that matter. But I also see its importance not only when you're talking about where your next appearance will be, but also when okay, I just lost my train of thought here. Not only when you're talking about when your next appearance will be, but it's you whatever review comes your way, whatever interview comes your way, you put it up. In the beginning, I used to cringe every time I did it, but then I saw someone like Salman Rushdie tweet a review that he had gotten 15 years ago, and then I realized, you know what, this is the way to go. This is how you need to do it. I wish we were in an era where we did not have to be on social media at all, but yeah, I think it's part and parcel of being a writer now, and I mostly loathe it. I try not to spend too much time on it. In fact, so many of my readers have written to me saying, "Oh, I commented on a post, but you did not react to it at all." And my answer is there are hundreds of comments out there. I could spend 3 hours a day replying to every single one of you, or I could do something more constructive with my time. So that is where I am. I am one of those writers who, there, I've explained myself, I think. Yeah.
I hear you. I hear you. Share your thoughts with us on these unprecedented times that we find ourselves in with the pandemic. How has the lockdown been, and where does hope come from for you in these times?
Um, I think one of the great things, again, if you want to look at the positive in a very, very, very negative situation, I think for a lot of us who were dismissive of the arts, who were dismissive of reading, writing, music, people who create these things, we realize just how important they are to our well-being, to our sanity. So that's been nice to know. There is a bookstore in my hometown called Rachna Books, easily one of the best bookstores in the nation, or if not the world. And a few weeks into the lockdown, they started shipping books all around the country. And the owner keeps telling me just how well that took off. The owner would post a book on Instagram, and then people would order copies of the book from far and wide. Okay, that is a very narrow-minded way of looking at the lockdown. And let me talk about it in a broader way. I think we may be on to a period where we're not going to import our kiwis from America anymore. When I was growing up, the apples I ate were succulent. They were proper apples, apples from Himachal Pradesh or from Lachung or in Sikkim or Yunnan. These days, all the apples I eat are these disgusting apples imported from America. I'm hoping that we will learn to eat local, learn to appreciate the immediate surroundings more. We have been talking about traveling a bit. I am based in Calcutta a few months of the year, but I have not been to the Sundarbans. I have not been to Shantiniketan. So I'm hoping that there's going to be a resurgence in a more local kind of traveling. Yeah, that's my 2 cents. It's hard to look at the positive in in these bleak times. So that was my desperate attempt at some infusing some positive energy.
No, but you've absolutely succeeded in doing that.
Okay, thank
Uh,
you.
what can you share with us? I think one last question, and then we can probably open it for questions from the audience. What can you share with us about your future projects? Can we expect, more books set
Uh,
in Eastern Himalayas, or perhaps a poetry? Um,
Swati, there may be another book. I will not write a collection of poems because this makes me a really awful writer. There is no money in poetry, guys, and I like my money. Sorry to say that. I have a lot of respect for poets who, but I will not write a collection of poems. And writing poetry is difficult, difficult, difficult. But my next book will likely take a long time. I do not want anything out there that I'm not completely satisfied with. Again, I do not talk about a work in progress simply because the result ends up being very, very different from what I envisioned the project to be. So there is going to be something. There will be a third book. It may be 2030, 2040. Who knows how long it'll take? But yeah, there will be a third book. I promise you that. I cannot promise anything after that, though.
I think on that uncertain note, let's open it for questions from the audience. But thank you very much, Prajwal. It's been truly a pleasure, talking to you. It's been a very engaging and enriching conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your excellent questions. It was a pleasure answering them. And I hope we get to meet in person eventually.
Absolutely.
I request the audience to use the raise the hand option on Zoom to ask their questions. We have the first question coming from Gautam Sen.
Hello.
Hi, Mr. Sen.
It's a pleasure to listen to you, though I have not read your books. I realize that you are living in Kolkata. When I see the beautiful furniture, can you hear me?
Yes, you broke off when you said, I realized that you're living in Calcutta and?
Because I can see the beautiful furniture behind you. Kolkata furniture.
Okay, yeah, sure.
I started writing at the age of 77, 78 for just entertainment for myself. But one question that I want to ask you is, you have this erratic way of writing when you don't write for a very long time and you're not a dedicated writer every morning or whatever. Do you ever get up in the middle of the night and suddenly sit down in front of your word processor, or if you write by hand in front of your pad and start writing?
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Mr. Sen. And congratulations on starting your writing career at the age of 77. That's such heartwarming news.
Well, I was too busy to write earlier because I was a cardiac surgeon.
Oh, wow. A doctor who writes. See, that's even better. And I hope you do great things with your writing. To answer your question about whether I've woken up in the middle of the night, yes, in the night. Yes, I've done that. It sounds like the most ridiculously pretentious thing to say, but there are times when I'm in the zone, when I have been writing and when I've been thinking about a book, thinking about the characters in the book, thinking about various plot lines, and I often end up dreaming about them. Again, it's not a pretentious thing to say, because when you've been thinking about the same thing so often, you're bound to dream about them too. So yeah, I have woken up in the middle of the night and written. Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much. Would you write short stories again?
I would love to, but I'm finding it extremely difficult to write short stories these days.
Why?
I have not been able to bring a short story to a satisfactory resolution is perhaps the toughest thing about writing a short story. All right. I would love to. It's just that I haven't done it in a few years. I find it more difficult to write than a novel. You have a lot of room to play with in a novel, right? Whereas with a short story, you only have a certain number of words, and you need to start, you need to build something up, you need to end it, etc., etc. But I'd love to. I'd love to.
Thank you, Prajwal. More power to your elbow.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sen. Thank you very much.
Question. We have Sonali, who's going to ask the next question.
Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Yeah, hi. So as a young aspiring writer who has also done her master's in creative writing, I had a question again about the process of writing. I totally agree with the idea that even I'm not a disciplined writer, but again, during our masters, we were given certain tools and certain questions to ask during our writing. So I wanted to know whether you ever, while writing, consider those questions, for example, the external wants, the internal needs, the agencies of characters, or do you write first and then come back to these questions and see if they work?
Sonali, may I ask you where you got your creative writing master's from?
So I did my master's in creative writing and publishing from City University, London.
Okay, okay. And was it an enjoyable experience? Did you learn a lot from it?
It was an interesting experience, and I have been working on the same project that I did for my master's. It's been about 3 to 4 years, and I'm still on that. So I think I got something out of it.
Okay. All right. No, those exercises that we did in our creative writing classes were a lot of fun, you know. In fact, I teach creative writing once a year too, and then I use a lot of those exercises for my students. They're useful to break the ice. They're useful to break out of their comfort, for the students to break out of their comfort zone. For example, I ask Americans to write a short story based on a culture that's not theirs, which is often the most challenging exercise that I've done because you know, a lot of them do not read books that are not based on their culture. Okay. I use them, but I don't think I use very many of them in my writing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I have trouble too. That's why I asked you this question.
So you should be happy to get rid of you know, whatever projects and activities were drilled down your throat on your program. I have done this thing where I created a Facebook account of one of my characters. And, you know, so I filled it out, favorite person, favorite music, favorite TV show, etc., etc. So you know, because someone in class had told me that that's how they wrote their characters, that's how they built their characters. But once I actually started writing this character, it sprouted wings of its own. She sprouted wings of her own. So I've never done that ever since. But who knows? It might work for you. So today, I mean, create a Facebook account of a character and see what happens. It didn't work for me though.
Okay, that's very interesting. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for your question.
Prajwal?
Yeah?
Yeah, so I'm Heaven. I also would like a question. So you said that you'd written a screenplay while doing your creative writing in college, and you'd attempted a screenplay. So how would you describe the process of writing a screenplay as compared to the process of writing a book, for that matter? Like, what is the difference, and What are the intricacies? And why would you term that experience bad for you, and the experience of writing a book of extremely like empowering, something like that? Yeah.
Thank you for the question. Even if there's one thing I'm extremely grateful to my creative writing masters for, it was that it taught me to dabble with other genres, right? Writing a screenplay being one of them. I had never embarked on anything like that before, never written a screenplay, and it was the most difficult writing I've done, simply because it was a novel thing. It was something, you're just thrown into the deep end, and then you have to. I adapted one of my stories into a screenplay. I have been told that the dialogue in my books is good, which would make you believe that I would be a natural at writing screenplays, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't the case. There was a lot of learning, there was a lot of unlearning. Sometimes when you're writing, say, a fiction, when you're writing a novel or a collection of short stories, you're relying on the beauty of words to carry, to say, on the beauty of words to compensate for the lack of a plot. You can't do that with a screenplay. I mean, you need to have a strong plot no matter what. Why was it difficult? Okay, that was and again, I did this as an assignment, right? I wrote this screenplay as an assignment, and I am one of those people who can never give their 100% when it is an assignment. Had it been a book I was going to publish, chances are I'd have given my heart, body, and soul to it. But because it was for a grade, I didn't care so much. I just wanted a passing grade. Does that answer your question?
I completely relate to the part which you said in the end. I cannot absolutely work on any assignments. It has to be, the grade always puts a limitation on thought process sometimes. And like, I suffered with this in college. So I have one more question with terms to that. So what does, now that you've spent like around 15-20 years like on writing, so what has writing meant for you, since you were thrown in the deep end of writing a book? What has it meant for you, and what have you got from it? Like that, it's a very personal kind of a thing, since writing is very subjective for everybody.
To be honest with you, I grew up liking to write, but I never, as I said before, I never thought that writing would be a career. But I am also not a writer who has to write or he will go crazy. I honestly am perfectly okay with not being a writer for life. It's worked out marvelously with me and the two books. I've gotten a fair amount of acclaim. I've gotten a dedicated readership, and I'm extremely grateful for the love and affection. But I am not so passionate about it that I will stick to it for life. At this point in my life, I do not enjoy writing very much. It will likely come back again, but even if it doesn't, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. I will not go crazy because I'm not able to write. It's a rather disappointing, unwriterly reply. I understand because, because writers are known to worship the art of writing and so on and so forth. I am not one of those writers. So I'm very happy for all that writing has given me. I've shamelessly continued taking advantage of it. Case in point, a book was published 7 years ago, and We're still talking about it. You guys are still asking me questions about it. The book is continuing to be nominated for awards. It is continuing to be translated into other languages. So all those are great things. And I'm very, very happy for it. I need to tell myself not to take it for granted. But even if all of that were to stop today, I'd be okay with it.
That's a wonderful answer. Yeah, thank you so much. I
Thank
really
you.
get, yeah. I think we will take over. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Prajwal. That was wonderful. What I find most interesting is that for someone who says that you loathe social media, you actually created a Facebook account for your character. Whether it worked out or not is a whole different story. But honestly, did you start loathing it more after the process, or did you already loathe it and you just did it anyway?
I'd say I guess like I've been on Facebook since, or I joined Facebook in 2005. So on and off, I've been on Facebook for 15 years. That's insane. That's too long a time. That's longer than my longest relationship. That's So I don't know. I don't like it at all, and yeah.
Fair enough. I was just adding to it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Swati, for conducting this beautiful conversation for all of us. As always, you were extremely engaging for all of us. Thank you, Prajwal. It's been a pleasure having you with us today. Thank you, everyone who's attended the session, who's asked questions. We will see you guys next time. And Prajwal, we look forward to that next book, whether it is 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the line. Hopefully, we'll see it.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Urvi. Thank you, Prajwal. And thanks everyone for joining.